I wanted to ask you just a little bit about, though, so, and I've called it the kind of UK, but you might want to call it globally. I'm just kind of interested in your thoughts and observations over the last, whatever that is, it may be the full 18 years, but about some of the changes that's occurred with recovery organisations and movements within the country. There was a high profile period of it being the label on every strategy. People were marching in the streets in their thousands, much more than they do now at one level. There was all sorts of organisations offering recovery conferences and stuff like that. And I just wonder what you think about some of that journey of more collectively, yes, and whether you've got thoughts or things that you've learned from it or want to share. Or
Yeah, I'm a big fan of all of that. That kind of, I think it was a really inspiring period of time where the recovery movement was internally plural, but it was learning from the Pride movement. Really, it was that, hard work over decades of facing down stigma by being visible and being public, by whatever means. And I mean, walks are a great way of doing it, but lots of other ways as well. I think that's a great way to change culture. I think, yeah, I mean, it was in decline even before COVID, significantly before COVID, I think, in this country, and COVID really kind of changed things. I mean, in some ways, a lot of visible recovery went online. So I got to quite a lot more conferences than I would have got to physically. So there was some of that, but that kind of celebratory, wearing purple and going out on the street and saying, yeah, I'm a person in recovery, or I'm an ally, or I'm part of this community. I think that has seen some decline. And I don't know, I'd love to know why you think that is, Wulf, but
I do have a view, actually.
Do you? I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well,
What
I
is
think
it?
some of it was what you were talking about. I think some of it was akin to Pride. Some of it was actually about challenging the stigma. And I
Yeah.
think it was about challenging governments and agencies. And it was saying, actually have a think about this differently. And I think in a funny way, one of the things that's happened that has done many individuals and has done some good, but has done an awful lot of undermining, has been the involvement of peers inside services. So,
Right.
so I think we've had a service user involvement, and I think what's happened is we've had a lot of people who are delivering peer stuff inside services and are peers inside services, and even being employed by some services, predominantly third sector rather than statutory. But I think all of what that's done in a way is that once you're inside, it becomes much harder to bite the hand off that feeds you at one level. And I think it quashes the advocacy part of the conversation. So
Yeah.
the peer-led part of the service, or the peer-led peer-to-peer activities in the broadest sense of the word, I don't even mean recovery now, I actually mean just inside even service, criminal justice service and so. So I think the peer-to-peer activities has continued to grow, yes, but its expense has come at a much more vocal, challenging, outspoken movement, if that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think of any of that, but
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. you're talking about all these big organizations that are now kind of in that space,
Yes.
and people are doing the work under the banners of those organizations rather than under the banner of kind of standing up in a bigger way against
Mm.
the forces. I mean, you could argue kind of in a Bruce Alexander kind of way that addiction is and the problems associated with addiction are a kind of the outworking of capitalism. And
Yeah.
I really resonate with those kind of ideas. And there was a period of time where um I think that was seen, and that was part of the discourse, that if we're going to advocate for recovery, we're going to advocate for you've got to advocate for equality if you're going to advocate
And
for
social
recovery.
justice, exactly.
Yeah,
And it's
and these
much
things
harder
are
to
linked. Mm,
and it's much harder to be that advocate once you're inside the system. It's much more
yeah,
difficult, yes.
yeah,
And the independence, and if you think about where we started this conversation, I mean, one of the things that's unique and remains unique about the fellowship is it retains its independence, of course.
yeah. It's
Yes.
not. There's no
And,
money
and for
involved. It's not professional. So
and for anybody
it's not
else,
allied with anyone.
no.
Yeah,
And for anybody else, it's really difficult to maintain that independence. And if you hold on to that independence, then what you actually do is you get slightly less, you're treated with less respect. Sometimes it's even slightly more disrespectful. So that
mm,
can be, well, you don't know what you're doing because you're a bunch of amateurs, you're not professional, or actually you're not subject to any regulation or oversight, or there's lots of those things that then get castigated in that direction, which enables the dismissing, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. But that
yeah.
dismissing is often coming from a position of financial vested interest or
Yes.
status vested interest, in an industry effectively.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think that is
Mm.
kind of
Because I
perhaps.
echo what you said. It in two, whatever it was, 2008, 9, 10, and 11. It felt quite powerful and
Mm,
challenging and outspoken. And
yeah,
and you used the word in decline. I kind of want to use the word it's receded, because and I
yeah,
want to ask you about what that's like in the I saw the other day that you were in and amongst what you called the Chester recovery community, and so I
mm,
think it might have just receded into small communities and off the national stage. I don't know what you think about that
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
statement.